All right, my friends, if January was all about setting big goals and accomplishing things this year, February is all about what do we need to work through in order to actually be able to do that? And the biggest block to us accomplishing our goals and creating the lives we want and feeling confident in our own skin is not external circumstances or anything we're personally lacking. It's actually at fundamental bottom, the unwillingness to feel our own emotions and our fear of our own emotions, our resistance to our own emotions, the reactivity we have to our own emotions. It's that reactivity that makes our emotions feel so much worse, last so much longer, and leads us to act in counterproductive ways. So for the next couple of episodes, we're doing some deep dives into what is going on when we try to avoid our emotions and how we can learn to allow, accept, and feel them in really concrete ways. Because I know that when we say feel your feelings, a lot of us don't actually know what that means. So we're starting off this week with a replay of a great episode that I did with my friend Rachel Hart a couple of years ago. Rachel is a coach who helps people change the relationship with their drinking. But because of that, she is incredible at helping people deal with their emotions. Because, of course, a lot of the reason that we use numbing out behaviors like drinking or anything else, gambling, Netflix, shopping, smoking, eating, whatever, is because we don't know how to cope with our feelings, right? And so we try to physically impact our bodies to change the way they feel. So this conversation with Rachel is a really great grounding and kind of revisiting or getting up to speed for the first time, if you never heard it before, about why and how we react to our emotions and what that does to us. Next week, we've got a new episode coming all about one of my favorite techniques for dealing with our emotions better, which is called microdosing your negative emotions. So these two episodes work really well in concert. You want to listen to this one this week to kind of prime your brain and get yourself thinking about your emotional life in a different way. And then next week, you're going to learn a technique you can use to increase your comfort with and capacity to tolerate negative emotion and to make it feel much less negative in the first place. So a really powerful 1-2 punch, a loving punch. With that, let my past self and Rachel take it away with this week's episode. Welcome to Unfuck Your Brain. I'm your host, Cara Loewentheil, Master Certified Coach and founder of the School of New Feminist Thought. I'm here to help you turn down your anxiety, turn up your confidence, and create a life on your own terms, one that you're truly excited to live. Let's go. All right, y'all. I was just telling my guest today, also my best friend, that I didn't really know what to say because I'm so used to saying, hello, my chickens, and, have a little conflict with our new identity and evolution and branding and chickens. And I was like, maybe I need another bird. And then she just said, why don't you just make bird sounds? So
no, I said bird calls.
Bird calls. So if next time you listen to the podcast, there's just like someone doing a, whisperwill. Is that the name? That's the name of a bird, right? Or like a
whippoorwill.
Whippoorwill, there we go. Or a blue jay call. You have Rachel to blame. So we are talking about drinking today, but listen, even if you don't drink, like I don't drink, you're going to want to listen to this episode because really what we're talking about is all of the kind of numbing and compulsive behaviors that we use to try to get away from our feelings. So if you are alive and a human, you are doing something to try to get away from your feelings. And it may be drinking, it might be something else, but you're still going to get a lot out of this. So this is like the podcast about drinking. That's for everybody, regardless of whether you drink. And I'm here with Rachel Ann Hart. Is that your middle name?
Yeah, no,
that's right, because we have the same middle name.
Rachel spelled differently, though.
We spell it differently. Well, I have the spelling I was given and the spelling I adopted, my chosen spelling. My parents spelled it A-N-N, but then I read Anne of Green Gables and, of course, wanted to be like that. So I, emotionally
you wanted to be me, A-N-N-E.
Yes, I emotionally adopted the E, but it's not on my birth certificate.
Oh, I love that you emotionally adopted the way I spell my middle name.
Well, it wasn't you. It was Anne of Green Gables, but now it's a point of similarity. All right. Rachel, tell us who you are and what you do and why you're here.
I am not Anne of Green Gables. So I, like Cara, am a coach and I work with people to help them develop a relationship with alcohol that feels good for them, whatever that means. So for some people, that means drinking less. For some people, it means, saving alcohol for special occasions. For other people, it's like not having alcohol in their life. So essentially, it's about helping you figure out what feels right and good for you, like Cara said, I work with people around alcohol, but of course, all the numbing behaviors come in, right? So a lot of times people will see that it's not just their drinking, it shows up in their eating, it shows up in their working, it shows up in spending, it shows up in all these places. And so it really is, you talk about, Cara, the idea of there's really like nothing better than being in charge of your own brain. And that's what you're teaching women how to do. I feel like the same thing applies with my work as well.
And let's talk about how we met, so everybody knows the background. We met at a Holiday Inn.
It was a Holiday Inn Express.
Holiday Inn Express, not even a Holiday Inn.
A Holiday Inn Express. Mm-hmm. We met in a conference room. Mm-hmm. I was the first person in the room trying to get a good, like the first best seat for coach training. Mm-hmm, and Cara was the second person in the room. And immediately gravitated to me. And then it turns out we had all these things in common, and the universe had been trying to bring us together for years.
Well, mostly we were in a room of people from all over the country with a lot of different dispositions. And we were like, oh, you're from New York and a brunette. And like, you seem to maybe not do mystical circles. So great. Here of course, little did we know Rachel would end up doing mystical circles. But
do I do mystical circles?
I don't know. You got more woo than I did over time. But here we are. 8 years later, almost 10 years.
A long
later.
Time, yeah. Yeah.
All right. That's not why people hear that. Okay, so let's talk about people who've been listening to the podcast are actually very tuned into this concept of like falling off the wagon right now, because we just did a whole series on kind of what I teach around why people fall off the wagon in general, like what that even means and why it happens. But so I will not kind of rehash that here, but I'd love to hear from you. I feel like drinking is maybe second right after weight loss, the most common thing for people to make like a resolution about and then fall off the wagon. I even see in my social media posts, like people I'm friendly with being like, well, dry January got to the 9th and then blah, right? Like it's like almost a whole cultural narrative, both around trying to do a dry January and then like how soon you stop. So I'd love to hear from you kind of, why is that so common that people like make a drinking resolution and then fail so quickly?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think alcohol, much like food, falls often into this kind of like good and bad, or I was good, I was bad. And that mentality can fuel a lot of people getting to the end of the year and then being like, oh God, like too much overindulgence. I was really bad. I was drinking too much. So now I'm going to be good and do a dry January. So it fuels that kind of binge and restrict mentality that, of course, you know, when you're approaching a period of taking a break from drinking with that mentality, it's not great. You're generally going to hit a moment where you're like, well, that didn't work, and then throw in the towel. I think also a lot of times there's so much shame that people will have and fear if it feels at all like, why am I not able to control my drinking? Like, what is going on here? And so a lot of times what I see and what I did myself, because, you know, this work was my work to do as well. You know, I would approach it as like, okay, so I got to prove that I can go a certain number of days to prove that I don't have a problem. Right. And so I wasn't looking at any of the reasons about like why I was drinking or what my desire was about. It was kind of like, I'm just going to like grit my teeth and use avoidance and get through a certain number of days to kind of prove that there's nothing wrong here. And of course, both of these mentalities, I think, are why a lot of people fall off the wagon. And then, like you said, you see on social media, people are like, okay, well, so much for that resolution. Like we got to, you know, day 10 and not working.
Or they make it through and they're like, okay, dry January's over. I celebrated by binge drinking February 1st. Like there is something so weird about the idea of like, okay, I'm just going to, it's like a diet, right? Or like a shopping freeze, or not that taking a break from an activity can't be helpful to understand. But
yeah,
if you're like, well, I'm taking a break and then I'm just going right back to how I did it before, right? What is the real point of the break? I think that idea that people are trying to prove something comes up a lot in resolutions. One of the things that we've been talking about on the podcast lately is like, what is the purpose behind the resolution you set? Is it shame motivated? Are you trying to prove something to somebody else? Are you trying to prove something to yourself? And that is such a good example of it. You're like, okay, my logic is that no matter how out of control I feel around my drinking and how negatively it's impacting me, if I can go 30 days and I don't quote unquote have a problem, and then I can just go back to using it the way I have been.
Well, I think what happens though is we do people a disservice because so often the conversation around alcohol, and I mean, frankly, food too, is really just a conversation around quantity, right? And so it's like, how much are you drinking? What, you know, so we're very fixated on the number. And so when you're very fixated on the number, you think that if I just focus on the number, that's going to give me the solution, right? So if I'm drinking too much, right, and then I'm able not to drink at all, then, I had a problem with the number and now I changed the number. And that's why a lot of people, sometimes people go into it kind of like, okay, I made it to the end of January, like now let's party. I find a lot of people will have the experience, and I did as well, of, okay, like that felt good. Like I felt physically better. Like I noticed kind of physical transformations. Maybe I didn't need it as much in certain situations that I thought I would. And then you reintroduce alcohol, and it can start to be this thing where it feels like, you're just kind of falling back into your old patterns. Right. And so it was like, well, what was that all about? And again, because we tend to look at this issue just from the surface level. I tell people all the time, like, two people can be polishing off a bottle of wine, at night, and their motivations, their desires, what's going on can be completely different. But we're just treating it from this place of like, just don't drink so much, right? Or just take a period of time off. And I think that's one of the reasons why people are like, okay, well, why didn't that work?
Yeah. I think that gets to something you talk about that's so important, which is like that most people aren't really even aware of why they're drinking, right? And I think the term you use is more like people ignore the reason they drink. So can you talk a little bit about that? These people are like consciously ignoring the reason they drink, or they're just like, is it like willful denial, or is it like
I
people
don't
just
think it's
aren't conscious of
willful.
it?
Yeah, I don't think it's willful denial. And I think we're not taught to understand it. I don't think no one gives us kind of any kind of, I don't know, like way to understand our drinking other than this kind of like good drinking, bad drinking, normal drinking, abnormal drinking. So when I talk about, people not really being fully aware, listen, for the longest time, I was just like, I just like to drink. It's fun, like full stop, right? Or like, I like the taste. I like craft cocktails, the end. And yeah, I always say to people, I'm not here to be like, and that's not true. Like, you don't actually really understand what's going on. It's like, yes, and what else? Like, you like the taste, and what else is it doing for you? And by the way, that can totally change in different situations, in different settings, around different people. But we're not really taught to have that kind of deeper conversation and understand how it's intertwined in so many areas of our life. And the fact that, yes, it's a reward for your lower brain for sure. And also, your higher brain is learning what it symbolizes, right? It like the drink will start to symbolize these unconscious things that I think we're often not aware of.
So let's talk a little bit more about what each of, like, for people who haven't been listening to your podcast, aren't as deep into your work. Can you talk a little bit about like, what do you mean when you say it's a reward for the lower brain? Like, what is it doing to your system that feels good to people?
Well, I think that one of the things, and I'm sure your listeners already know all of this, right? But the lower brain is really designed to just go find rewards in the environment. And so when I say it's a reward in the sense that your lower brain is like, ooh, good, right? Like it's activating your reward system in your lower brain. And so the fact that it is, pleasurable, then your brain starts to remember it. It wants to know, where can I find it again? But also understanding that, the reward that you get from a grape is going to be very different than the intensity of the reward that you get from, a barrel of fermented grapes, right? Like that intensity goes up. And so understanding that, like, the drive of the lower brain really is so basic, so simple. It's, how do I keep this organism safe, right? And I'm going to do it by trying to, find pleasure and avoid pain, right? And it's like a very simple algorithm that's running that lower brain. And so understanding, that alcohol, like many things, right? Like food, like sex, like the rewards that we get from scrolling through, TikTok, like there's so many things that give us that kind of like immediate little like, ooh, this is good, right? I want more. And so that's what I'm talking about when it comes to the lower brain.
And then on top of that, there are these sort of the stories that we layer on about what a drink means and what it does for us. So can you what are some common stories you see people have about kind of like what drinking symbolizes or why it's important?
Yeah. So I think for some people, it can be like, this is my treat for, like all the hard work that I did. Sometimes it can be like, this is a sign that the day is done, right? Like, so a lot of parents, it's just like, I'm off the clock, right? I open up that bottle, right? I get out the beer, like I'm off the clock. A lot of people, we have the stories around like, this is how I form emotional bonds and feel connected. It can be about like, this is how we elevate situations or how we celebrate, how we make things more special. We can use alcohol to feel more at ease in social situations when we feel anxiety. It can be about things are too much right now, right? Like I just can't handle everything that's going on. And this is my way to just tap out, right? It can be a sense of freedom for some people. This idea of like, now I get to be wild, right? I don't have to be my kind of, paying attention to what people think. I can kind of cut loose and be wild. And then, of course, it's often connected with sleeping. It's often connected with pain management. I mean, there's so many different kind of stories that are wrapped up into this. I mean, I talk about this as different archetypes that your brain will start to learn, like, oh, this is what the drink is doing for me. And that level, even though it's there, it's often happening at a very unconscious level.
If you are loving the podcast and what you're learning here, then you are going to absolutely die for my book, Take Back Your Brain: How a Sexist Society Gets in Your Head and How to Get It Out. I truly believe that this book became an instant national bestseller because it is so concrete and actionable and illuminating, so that you actually are learning why your brain is the way it is and you're learning how to change it. I wrote every single word myself. I read the audiobook myself. So if you are loving the podcast, you are going to love the book. And the book is really a one-stop shop for how to understand exactly why your brain works the way it does and how to actually change it. You can get it wherever books are sold, and you're going to be able to take this work so much deeper and learn so many new concepts and tools and exercises that aren't part of the podcast, because that's how publishing contracts work. That I just know that if you love the podcast, you're going to love the book too. I definitely want to talk about the archetypes, but I just want to talk a little bit more about this sort of, it's so interesting the way that our brain like attaches a story to the act. And then I'm thinking of two different examples. So one is when I dated this guy very briefly in my, I don't know, like early 30s, but I remember him saying to me like kind of, but he was in his also early 30s, not like 21 and in a frat or something. I remember him saying to me like, you're like the first person I've ever met who likes to have sex sober, because it's like so common that people use alcohol to lubricate, pun not intended, I guess, sexual interactions, right? To like feel sexy, to like lower their inhibitions, to not feel uptight, to, all, which is like, and at the time I was just like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like that is, I guess, just a moment of being like, people are doing this in a completely different way. But that sort of how common it was for him to have alcohol just be part of any kind of date or sexual interaction. And then the other funny example I'm thinking of is my partner doesn't really drink that much anymore because I don't really drink, and not that he's not allowed to or something, but he just says his frequency has gone down because I'm not drinking. So then he discovered non-alcoholic beer, and he will drink non-alcoholic beer, and to him it's like, well, it's fun, I'm having a beer. Actually, the alcohol is no longer there, but the symbolism of like having a beer still like signals. It's like such a perfect example of how the experience you're having, maybe actually we attribute it to the alcohol, but it may be actually completely unrelated to the alcohol, or the alcohol could even be counterproductive to the experience, but we have a story about it. So he's still like, it is still fun for him to have a beer because his story is that beer is fun, even though the beer is actually not doing anything to his system biologically, which I think is like fascinating. Okay. So can you tell us some about the 8 archetypes? As no pop quiz, this feels like, I'm like, I mean, like, I don't want to do it live. Tell us what the 8 archetypes are. I mean, I think let's back up a little. Kind of tell us, why is it helpful to think of your drinking as an archetype, right? Like what led you to kind of develop this after working in this area for a while?
Well, I mean, I think one of the things that I encountered is that, people will have very unique relationships with their desire, with what the drink represents, how they use it. And so, my desire to have a way for people to help kind of find themselves. And what I will say about the archetypes is it's not like, okay, this is who I am. I am this type of drinker. The archetypes I talk about, like, they're always present. They always apply. They're not just like, ooh, they only apply for problematic drinking. It's about understanding that our brain is always getting these messages from the time that we're kids, right? I mean, this happens for many people well before they start ever drinking, but we're getting all these messages, and the brain is starting to kind of learn, oh, this is what the drink symbolizes. This is what it's doing for me, or this is what I think it's doing for me in this situation. And so the archetypes, when I have people kind of take the quiz and go through and also like self-identify, one of the things that I'm always saying is, most people will identify with multiple archetypes, and it can change over time. Like it can change. Your archetypes maybe in your teens and 20s when you started drinking may be very different in your 40s and 50s. They may look very different, depending on where you are. It's really just to help you understand, hey, what else is here? Like in this moment when I'm desiring the drink, it's I like to drink. Like it's like, I like the beer. And what else, right? What else is there? And so there are 8 archetypes. We have the upgrade, which is all about like elevating situations, making things special, making things celebratory. I talk about one called the connector, which is like it sounds like. It's about creating emotional bonds. The reward is all about that kind of like using alcohol either as like a treat or like a sign, like kind of like, I'm done, right? Like this is the end of the day. Sometimes people will fall with a reward that can be like a daily thing. Sometimes people will be like, no, I like save it up until, I get through my week and then the weekend comes. There's also the escape, which is much more of that sense of, I just need to stop thinking, right? Like whatever's on my mind, whatever is bothering me, I need a way to stop thinking. And then alcohol becomes a way to do that. There's the mask. That is something that I really identified with in my 20s, which is all about drinking to specifically deal with social anxiety and that sense of like, for me, because like you said, alcohol was also very connected with sex for me, because I was like, oh, well, it works well at parties when I'm feeling anxious. So when I have all my clothes off, like that will help too, right? So there's the mask. There's also the relief or the remedy, sorry, which is all about using it for, managing any kind of discomfort, managing any kind of insomnia. There's hourglass, which is all about when people will start, using it as a way to deal with boredom or having a lot of kind of unscheduled time. And then there is the release. That was another thing for me that I really identified with in my 20s when I was drinking a lot, which was all about like, I'm so good. I'm, like I do everything right. And this is my chance to be kind of like wild, and I don't have to follow all the rules. I can, just kind of cut loose. So the idea here is using these archetypes to help you understand why it can be challenging to say no. Because if we're just focused on quantity, if we're just focused on the number, we're going to miss what's actually happening in a particular situation. We're going to miss why when it's like, okay, I can easily say no, maybe when I'm at home, but it's harder when I'm out, or people will say vice versa, to really understand, okay, so what's happening beneath the surface that we need to address as well if you want to create that change.
I think it's important to just emphasize what you said, which is that it's not sort of like, oh, this is your like genetic or astrological predisposition to this, right? It's just a way of describing kind of what are the thought and use patterns you've gotten into in ways that, like, obviously everybody's a tiny bit different, but if we look at all the ways people are drinking, we can say, okay, they tend to cluster into kind of these 8 patterns, and you're probably in, 2 of the patterns, 3 of the like, you could be in more than one of the patterns.
Well, when people do this work, they always get a primary and secondary archetype, which just says like, these are kind of like the top 2 tendencies that you have, but people will find like other ones apply as well. Right. And again, it's not like, and, we can like look into your DNA and this is going to describe, what's going on. It really is just helping you kind of understand what is there, what is connected with your desire beyond just like, yeah, I like to drink.
I'm just thinking about like people who go on vacation. One of the things I've always found odd as a non-drinker is that suddenly on vacation, people will just start drinking at like 10 a.m. And it occurs to me, it's like Tuesday, it's like the celebration one. And then it's also the like, not hourglass, not knowing what to do with time. It's unstructured. I don't have my routine. So like, it's like you get into the airport and all of a sudden it's just like a liminal space where it's normal to have beer at 9 a.m. at breakfast, when like those same people would usually, I mean, maybe some people are just having beer at 9 a.m. with breakfast anyway, but I feel like more people in an airport are doing it who wouldn't do it somewhere else, because it is like that marker of like, oh, it's fun time for people, and that like, I'm out of my routine, so I don't know what to do.
Yeah. And I think, for me, I used to travel a lot before I became a coach. And so I was traveling, it was like in airports all the time, traveling internationally so much. And I had so much pent up anxiety about travel, right? And so it was like my brain was always spinning like, am I going to be there on time? Is a cab, are we going to get stuck in traffic? What's going to happen? And if I miss this connection, like I had so much of that kind of like, oh, I'm wound so tight in this anxiety that for me, I would get through security and it was like, okay, like where's the lounge, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't like a fun thing in that instance. It was that, for me, it was that moment of like, okay, like this is my reward for just sitting, going through the Lincoln Tunnel
just
and being like,
surviving this anxiety.
surviving it, right? But I think that's the point, is that you can see, like, you can look at people drinking whatever at like 8 a.m. in an airport, and it's happening for all of these different reasons. And again, one of the things that was so frustrating for me, and I think frustrating for so many people that I work with, is this sense of like, why can I drink quote unquote normally over here in this situation and I'm not overdoing it? And then in this other situation, it feels like a different version of me. So people, again, because we so often only talk about quantity, we don't give people any kind of, any kind of tether to understand, hey, this is why your drinking can look different in different situations, and why maybe you're like, yeah, I know to, be like, okay, I'm going to take it easy over here. And in this other place, I don't. And that, I think, is a missing piece of a puzzle for a lot of people.
So I think what you're talking about really reminds me of what I've been teaching this month around like falling off the wagon and why that happens. And, people think that it's just like, it's about willpower, it's about discipline. And when you use that sort of flattening like analysis, sort of just the same as when you use the flattening analysis of like, well, 2 drinks a night is normal. And so if I have that amount, then that, no matter what the emotion or what it's like for me underneath, like that's just, I'm just going to evaluate it with that number. People use the same thing of sort of like, I can look at one person who's maybe going to the gym every day and I think, wow, they have so much willpower and discipline, but actually it may not even be hard for them to do that because they don't have whatever emotions are getting in the way. Whereas somebody who's going once a week, it might be like actually such a bigger psychological and emotional project for them to be able to do that based on whatever the kind of emotional and thought work barriers they have. And that one of the reasons people fall off the wagon is that we don't equip them with any emotional tools to be like, why is this hard for me? Like, what is happening? What is coming up for me? It's like the inability to feel discomfort is really why people stop achieving their goals, whether it's not drinking or anything else, right? It's not willpower or discipline. It's, I don't have the tools and skills to deal with how I feel. And so it doesn't matter how motivated you feel January 1st. If you don't have those tools, you're not making it very far.
Yeah. And I think sometimes especially when it comes to desire and urges, the only tools that we are given are like, okay, so you need to grit your teeth or you just need to avoid the situation. And I mean, I was just coaching someone on this yesterday where, I talk about, we have to develop a different relationship with our urges, right? Like imagine, I always talk about like, imagine just being like so curious when the urge appears, welcoming it, wanting it to be there. I mean, I even talk with, people I work with about, can we find some humor in the presence of the urge? And this one person I was coaching was saying, I'm just ticked off. Like, I'm just angry. Like I'm just angry when it's there. I don't want to talk to it. I don't want to be curious about it. I want it to go away. And so as we were starting to really unravel what was going on there, one of the things that she was saying is, well, I just don't believe that I actually can trust myself when I have urges. And so we talked about what that means. Like when your lower brain is like, ooh, reward, and it's accompanied with this, this thought that maybe you've practiced over and over again, I can't be trusted. What's actually going on is that you're not angry at the urge, you're scared. And so then how do we handle these moments? And I think a big piece of that when it comes to changing your relationship with your desire and your urges is disentangling all of that, right? Like being able to see like, this is my lower brain over here, just being like, rewards are good, rewards, more reward, right?
And like then, that blinking like red neon sign in a red light district. It's
100%.
Like, reward.
And then over here is this story, right? Like the story that, this person had attached to her drinking, which was like, oh, obviously I'm someone who can't be trusted, right? Like as if that was just like who she was built into, like her DNA. And so, yeah, we have to equip people with tools. Not only how do you manage the discomfort, how do you get curious about your urges? how do you get curious around temptation, and or why are you avoiding temptation? I think that's like a lot of people will structure dry January to be like, yeah, okay, I can do it, but like I definitely can't see these friends and I'm definitely not going to go here. And
Right. Or like,
so
I can't do it because my sister's getting married in January. So it'll have to be a different month because I can't
exactly.
possibly go to my sister's wedding and not drink.
Exactly. And
Right.
so
It's like changing the circumstance.
we need all of these tools, and I think when it comes to all the excuses that come up, we need tools that are more than just like, well, just say no, right? Like, just don't do it. Just don't be stupid, right? It's like, well, when I'm having these excuses, I always think that excuses are actually really helpful, that they're trying to help us understand something about the habit that we can't fully see. They're trying to, when we approach all of these things from a place of curiosity, they're trying to show something and reveal something that actually helps us create change. But so often we're like, ugh, just go away. I don't want you here.
Yeah. And I think that's sort of, one of the things that we talked about on the podcast a bunch before January 1st was the sort of unrealistic expectation when we make a resolution or set a goal that's just sort of like, okay, well, I've planned for what I need for this to all work great the first time. And so off we go, right? As opposed to planning for, well, okay, but like what obstacles come up, right? And the example I gave on the podcast was smoking. And it was like, okay, your plan can be, I'm going to use the patch. That's not really a plan. Like, what are you going to do when you feel anxious and you're used to smoking to cope with it? What are you going to do when your friends go out for their smoke break and you feel FOMO? What are you going to do when you get drunk and do have a cigarette? Then you got to decide how to think about that. Like, all of that is what you're saying is completely in line, which is like, we need to have a plan beyond, I'm just going to white knuckle it, or I'm just going to avoid these circumstances, which I think comes back to what we talked about in the beginning that feels so important, which is like, what's the purpose of the break or the change or the whatever, right? Like, why are we doing this? And what's the plan for afterwards? Like, are we trying to get to know our drinking better? Are we trying to reduce our drinking in some sort of ongoing way? Whether we're not drinking to prove to ourselves we don't have a quote unquote problem, or we're trying to, lose weight to prove that we're good enough, or we're trying to like work out to prove that we're disciplined, or it's like, if you're trying to do a thing to prove something to your own brain, basically, right? Or somebody else you're projecting your own brain onto, even if you do it, you get to the end and it's like, okay, now what?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's why I work with so many people. I had this in my own experience, right? That it's like, okay, well, like I got everything else in my life figured out. I'm just like a fuck up here. So I'm finally going to stop feeling like a fuck up if I fix my drinking, right? I'm finally going to feel good about myself. And then I have so many people who are like, but here I am, like I'll work with people who are like, I'm not even drinking right now, but I'm here. I'm like, you're right. Like I'm here. I'm in this membership because it's like, I figured out how to say no, but I'm still just like waiting for the other shoe to drop. And I still don't actually feel good about myself. And they don't realize when the brain has that thought pattern, you're a screw up or you're a fuck up, you change the circumstance and it's like, yeah, but with this neural pathway is very fast and it's very fun. Like we do it very quickly.
It's very familiar. Yeah.
Find the new thing.
Right. And I think that's most common to just see it like come up in some other area instead. Like, okay, I'm not drinking, but now I'm like online shopping a lot, or I'm like really scrolling on my phone all the time, or I'm whatever else.
Yeah, exactly.
So where can people find and learn about their archetype? We love a good self-knowledge quiz.
We love a good quiz. Yeah.
We love a good quiz. Where can we find out our archetypes?
So if you go to findyourdrinktype.com, you can take the quiz there. You'll get your primary and your secondary archetypes. Again, this is not like who you are. These are the kind of tendencies that right now in your life, your drinking may gravitate towards. Again, if you took the quiz, a decade ago, if you take it a decade from now, it can change. So it really is about just giving you that kind of information. You'll also get your full results for all 8 archetypes as well. So you can see which ones you're kind of most likely or least likely to apply right now.
And you all need to know that Rachel is the most thorough content creator in the history of the universe. So I promise you, I have not seen it, so I'm making this up, but I would bet that when you put together everything she wrote for all 8 archetypes, it is probably the length of a published book. And if not, could easily be made into one. So that is not to overwhelm you. You only need to read about 1 or 2, but it's not going to be like, surprise, you're the social drinking archetype. You like to drink in social situations. The end. Like, that's not how Rachel rolls. So
yeah, no. So when you get the information, yes, that is a good point. So when you get it, it will talk about common obstacles. It will talk about the mindset trap. Each archetype has a superpower. It will talk about that. It gives you like a whole, Kara is laughing. It gives you like a whole breakdown to really understand, hey, when you see that this archetype applies, why does it actually make not only it tricky to say no, but why don't rules work? Why don't, setting rules, or why don't just like abstaining? Why isn't that going to help you create the change that you want?
And then presumably it's going to help direct them towards how to do it better.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. So you should check it out. When Rachel sent in what she called B- work for her interview prep for this, my PR person whose job it is to book podcast guests said, I've never seen anything like this. This is the model for all time for everyone else. And that was what Rachel considers her B- work. So, and she considers the archetypes her A+ work. So you need to go to the website, give it to us again.
Findyourdrinktype.com.
Findyourdrinktype.com. Go take the quiz. And then where can people find you on podcasts if they want to learn more?
So you can find me at rachelhart.com. My podcast is Take a Break from Drinking. And then I have a membership as well called Take a Break.
You will find our work is very compatible. Somebody in the Society Facebook group the other day was like, I love this. I had said something in an event that was like about work. And they were like, that sounds really similar to this thing that this coach Rachel Hart says. And I was like, yes, I'm sure that we got it from each other because we text all the time. All right. Thank you so much for coming on, my friend.
Thank you.
Did you know that Take Back Your Brain, my first book, is available on hardcover, ebook, and audiobook? And I read the audiobook myself. So if you love the podcast, you are going to want to make sure that you get a copy of Take Back Your Brain, How a Sexist Society Gets in Your Head and How to Get It Out. It is everything you need to understand your brain and change your brain start to finish in one book. It is available wherever books and audiobooks are sold. And if you love it, all I ask is that you please leave us a review on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or Goodreads, wherever you get it from or wherever you share your thoughts about books. Those reviews really help the algorithms boost the book, show it to more people, share it, keep the book circulating longer. And we all know that every woman in the world needs to understand how to change her brain, not so that she can think what I want her to think, but so that she can decide for herself what to think. That's really what all of this work is about. That's what all of us are doing with the podcast. And that is now what the book is here to do as well.